Using the power of the internet, you can now watch GLC on any TV in the US, Canada, the UK, and Ireland with Roku. Basically, a box that connects to your television. Roku acts as a middleman between your internet connection and your television. So if you have internet service at your home, chances are high that you can watch all of the great GLC programming. And best of all, it's highly affordable too, with only a one-time fee ranging from $50 to $100. Log on to our website, www.glc.us.com, for details on how you can watch GLC via Roku. Well, welcome to another Update News. This is Monday.
It is Monday, and we have big news today.
There's so much news going on. Amy, you have pulled a lot of incredible articles for us.
Okay, well, that's not the biggest news. The biggest news is actually my mother. Because everybody's going, okay, where's Tommy? All right. First and foremost, we have to tell them this because it's affecting everything right now. Yes. Okay. FYI, Mother had surgery last Wednesday, and no, we couldn't tell you until everything was all said and done. And she is home. She's resting. Actually, she's already getting hard to tie down. But she won't be here for at least 2 weeks.
So that means you're wearing another hat.
Well, as most people know, I don't participate in Update every time you guys do it. I've been participating a lot since Operation
Protective Edge
in Israel started, because we went to an everyday thing. But for the most part, I have my hands pretty full, so I don't do Update News. Right. That's Mom's little baby.
But currently you are, and we appreciate that.
I will be doing all the news while Mom is out.
Sure.
So, but we are having to switch back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because there's just no way that I can keep up with what I must keep up with.
Well, we covered every single day when it was the most critical. It's not as critical now, so I think that was a good decision.
Yeah, it was very critical. And we did survive a 72-hour truce that started, which was very interesting, right before Mom's operation last Wednesday. That's when it went into effect. And I have to tell you, it's so funny. The first thing Mother asked me when she was conscious, what's going on in Israel? It's like, okay, well, the truce is held, Mom. So, yeah. So, you know.
It is really funny.
Well, that's a big concern. But right now there is yet another truce that went into effect, I believe, at midnight.
Okay. So hopefully that will hold as well.
That's right.
Well, I get the wonderful pleasure of being able to read Mr. Cooper's letter. So I'll take his letter. Here it is. Comes to GLC. Hello to you all. Thank you for Brother Al's book. That would be Mr. Cooper. I read it right away. The bullet points of lies versus the truth were very good. Easy to read and speaks forth on the critical topics and how mostly our media lies to America. Yeshua bless you all. And that comes to us from Barbie from Midland, Texas. Thanks, Barbie.
Well, we have a video from Lars Innerson, and we'll be back with you right after this.
Shalom, I'm Lars Innerson with the Watchmen International, coming to you from Israel on the border to Gaza. Yesterday, Israel agreed to another 72-hour ceasefire with Hamas beginning at midnight. As usual, Hamas fired a huge volley of rockets in over Israel, including over Tel Aviv, right before the ceasefire was set to begin. It is a very dangerous situation with this war of attrition that has now begun here. Israel will send a delegation to Cairo to begin ceasefire talks again. Egypt, according to intelligence sources, told Israel last week that it's very difficult to get Hamas to agree on any compromise because they do not see that Israel has defeated them in this conflict. So there has been a miscalculation by the government here. They said that when the leaders of Hamas come out of their tunnels in Gaza and see the devastation, they will think twice about attacking Israel again. And as we have said before, This is a miscalculation. Hamas does not care about the devastation in Gaza. In fact, that's an encouragement for them, because it's the best commercial for them to turn the whole world against Israel. And that is a major reason for why Hamas was established by the Muslim Brotherhood in 1987. The strategy was to get the conflict going here in Gaza, and through this conflict begin to unite the whole world against Israel. And they have really succeeded so far. We also need to understand that Israel is reluctant to continue the fighting here in Gaza, knowing that if they hit Hamas too hard, there are other enemies in the neighborhood that might want to join the battle. To the north, we have Hezbollah, a much, much more dangerous enemy. After the ceasefire that was negotiated there in 2006, Hezbollah has armed themselves to the teeth. They have over 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel, much more advanced and with the ability to pinpoint strike Israel wherever they want to all over the nation. So naturally, Israel is afraid of this, and also we should understand that Hezbollah has also dug a lot of tunnels into Israel, into Galilee, under the border to Israel from Lebanon. In fact, most likely Hamas has learned a lot from Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is ready at the time of its choosing to go to war against Israel. The reason we're coming to you with these video updates is mainly to encourage you to pray. I'm reminded of a statement that the Queen of Scotland made during the Reformation when she said, "I fear the prayers of John Knox more than the whole army of Spain." It's time for intercessors like that to begin to take their place here on the battlefield in this time, crucial time for Israel. This conflict with Hamas, it's very possible that it will escalate into a major conflict with Islam all over the Middle East. Islam is now advancing at a rapid pace also in Iraq, as we know, and we need to cover the situation there in prayer as well. And so I encourage you to get your prayer motor, prayer engine going if you have been slacking in this area, because we might see some major confrontation here, including maybe what will be a full-scale world war within the coming years here in the Middle East. So what is happening now here in Gaza, as we've said several times before here, it is very, very crucial. The responsibility that is on the shoulders of the Prime Minister and the government is tremendous. The Chief of Staff, Benny Gantz, said yesterday that it is not acceptable that there is a war of attrition that is now beginning. On the other hand, we know that the entire world is turning heavy against Israel as soon as they begin to defend themselves. They say Israel has a right to defend themselves, but they must be very careful with the civilian population in Gaza. We have yet shown in these updates that Israel is more careful with the civilian population in Gaza than any other army in the entire history of warfare. The ratio, the proportionality of civilian deaths for every fighting soldier here in Gaza is approximately 1-on-1, which is only 25% as much as, for instance, in the NATO warfare in Kosovo or the Iraq war in 2003. So it is a very unfair accusation that is coming against Israel. It is needed with prayer for God's chosen people. We know much is at stake. We encourage you to go to our website and subscribe to the Elijah Prayer Army prayer alerts, and you will get these updates into your computer with the prayer points. Go to thewatchmen.org and subscribe to the prayer alerts from the Elijah Prayer Army. I'm Lars Enarsson with the Watchmen International from Israel on the border to Gaza. Shalom.
Well, we have a lot of news that we're going to cover in the next less than 20 minutes, and we're going to get right after it, eh?
Okay, you're up.
The first article comes to us from Reuters. After 4 nights of humanitarian relief airdrops, the United States is exploring options to evacuate thousands of Iraqi civilians trapped on a barren mountain in northern Iraq by Islamic militants, U.S. officials said on Sunday. While the airdrops appear to have provided urgently needed aid, the harsh conditions of the Sinjar mountain range in midsummer have taken scores of lives among Iraq's Yazidi minority, who are threatened by hardline militants from the Islamic State. More than 30,000 Yazidis, mainly from Sinjar, have already crossed into an area of northern Iraq controlled by Kurdish security forces after a week-long journey that took them through Syria after they left the mountain retreat that had become a graveyard for many, according to Yazidi and UN officials. For now, many Yazidis appear to prefer contending with the Sinjar mountains than taking their chances with the Islamic State. Iraqi Human Rights Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani said on Sunday Islamic State fighters killed hundreds of Yazidis after seizing Sinjar, burying some alive and taking women as slaves. Yazidis are followers of an ancient religion derived from Zoroastrianism. As with any group that does not follow Islam, the Yazidis are viewed as devil worshippers by the Sunni militants of Islamic State who have told them to convert to Islam or face death. U.S. forces have dropped a total of more than 74,000 meals and more than 15,000 gallons of fresh drinking water so far to those trapped on the arid mountain. Proposals for a rescue mission to save the group underscore the limits of the airdrops ordered last week by U.S. President Barack Obama. Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes told Reuters that the airdrops have been effective and noted that U.S. aircraft have also attacked Islamic State fighters who have laid siege to Sinjar Mountain. The plight of the Yazidis, which prompted a reluctant Obama to intervene militarily in Iraq last week, remains acute. The UN mission in Iraq has said it's preparing a humanitarian corridor to permit the Yazidis to flee to safety. Yet any mission to evacuate the remaining Yazidis from the mountain is likely to be perilous and could test Obama's pledge to limit U.S. involvement in Iraq's latest chaos. To establish a humanitarian corridor, the United Nations and any nations that participated would have to overcome the Islamic State's military advantage over Kurdish security forces known as the Peshmerga. Ken Pollack, a former CIA and White House expert on the region, said they can't stay on the mountain. They have to leave. Pollack said there are just 2 options for securing safe passage for the Yazidis off that mountain. One, he said, is for UN representatives to convince the Islamic State to let the Yazidis go or be pummeled by American airstrikes. The second is a corridor secured by Peshmerga or the Iraq Army troops and U.S. air power. Obama has insisted that he will not send U.S. combat troops back to Iraq, saying the U.S. military response will be limited to protecting the Yazidis and the Kurdish city of Arbil, where numerous U.S. advisors are present. Fred Hoff, a former senior State Department official now at the Atlantic Council, said the U.S. strikes could help by enabling the Peshmerga, who have suffered recent defeats at Islamic State's hands, to regain the advantage. Hoff said the key to rescuing tens of thousands of Yazidis is for the Peshmerga, with tactical air support from U.S. naval aviation and Air Force assets, to clear the Sinjar area of Islamic State fighters and make it possible to rescue and resettle these terrified people and allow truckloads of emergency humanitarian aid to reach them.
What a scary situation for those folks to be in, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this comes to us from AFP, and we're turning our attention to Sydney, Australia for a moment. A shocking image of what is believed to be the young son of an Australian man holding a decapitated head in Syria shows how barbaric the Islamic State terrorist army is. Prime Minister Tony Abbott said this on Monday. Well, the picture taken in the northern Syria city of Raqqa was posted on the Twitter account of Khaled Sharoof, an Australian who fled to Syria last year and is now an IS fighter. The Australian newspaper said this, and the photograph reportedly shows Sharoof's 7-year-old son, who was raised in Sydney, dressed like any other young boy in blue checkered trousers, a blue shirt, and baseball cap, except he's struggling to hold up the severed head of a slain Syrian soldier by his hair. It was captioned with the words, "That's my boy." Another photo published by the newspaper shows Sharoof dressed in camouflage fatigues, posing with 3 young boys believed to be by security agencies, believed to be his own sons. All are holding guns in front of the flag of the Islamic State, the Sunni militants who have swept across Iraq and Syria, seizing swaths of territory. The Australian Prime Minister, speaking to ABC Radio from the Netherlands, said the pictures showed the barbaric nature of the Sunni extremists. He said, "What we've got to appreciate is that Islamic State, the IS, as they're now calling themselves, is not just a terrorist group. It's a terrorist army. And they're seeking not just a terrorist enclave, but effectively a terrorist state, a terrorist nation. And this does pose extraordinary problems, not just for the people of the Middle East, but for the wider world. We're seeing more and more evidence of just how barbaric this particular entity is." U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel was equally outraged, saying the militants were a threat to the civilized world. Officials have said up to 150 Australians are fighting alongside militants overseas, mostly in Iraq and Syria. Australia has an arrest warrant out for Sharoof, who has also been pictured posing with severed heads. Sharoof, who served almost 4 years in prison after pleading guilty to a 2005 conspiracy to attack Sydney, fled the country using his brother's passport. Australian Defence Minister David Johnston said he was revolted by the image, which he called a shocking misrepresentation of Islam.
Well, the next article we have comes to us from CNN, and it's on Ebola, the worst outbreak of Ebola, which has now killed 961 people and triggered an international public health emergency, may have started with a 2-year-old patient in a village in Guinea. According to a report published in the New England Journal of Medicine, about 8 months ago, the toddler, who researchers believe may have been patient 0, suffered fever, black stool, and vomiting. Just 4 days after showing the painful symptoms, the child died on December the 6th, 2013. Scientists don't know exactly how the toddler contracted the virus. Ebola is spread from animals to humans through infected fluids or tissue, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization. But Ebola spreads from person to person through contact with organs and bodily fluids such as blood, saliva, urine, and other secretions of infected people. It has no known cure. Researchers who published the report found a chain of illnesses in the toddler's family. After the child's death, the mother suffered bleeding symptoms and died just 7 days later on December 13th. Then the toddler's 3-year-old sister died on December 29th, with symptoms including fever, vomiting, and black diarrhea. The illness subsequently affected the toddler's grandmother, who died on January 1st. The illness spread outside their village after several people attended that grandmother's funeral because people came in close contact with the body. 2 of the funeral attendees appeared to bring back the virus to their village, where it spread to healthcare workers and other family members who took care of infected patients. From there, more Guinea towns were affected and clusters of the disease popped up in early 2014. The area in southern Guinea is close to the Sierra Leone and Liberian borders. In early March, the Ministry of Health in Guinea and Doctors Without Borders in Guinea were notified about the disease clusters. Health investigators arrived that month and began tracing the disease by examining hospital documents and conducting interviews with affected families and villagers. Ebola has now spread to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria, prompting global concerns. The report about the emergence of Ebola in Guinea was authored by dozens of international doctors and researchers from institutions in France, Germany, Guinea, the World Health Organization, and Doctors Without Borders.
Oh, that is such a frightening thing to think that Ebola is spreading like that. But thank God we have good doctors that are working on it, and hopefully they will come up with a cure. Well, this comes to us from Business Insider. According to a New York Times piece, Wall Street is freaking out about Stanford economist Anat Admati's new book on the future of banking, saying, quote, "Her ideas are wildly impractical, bad for the American economy, and not to be taken seriously," end of quote. But they are being taken seriously. President Obama invited Admati and 5 other economists to a private lunch to discuss their ideas. And one of those other 5 economists was the notorious anti-Wall Streeter Paul Krugman. In The Banker's New Clothes, What's Wrong with Banking and What to Do About It, Admati argues that because banks don't use their own money, they take greater risks, and as a result, they keep crashing the economy. Well, her solution is to make banks behave more like other companies by forcing them to reduce sharply their reliance on borrowed money, according to the Times article. She says large banks should be required to raise at least 30% of their funding in the form of equity, which is 6 times more than the current average for the largest American banks. But according to the article, this solution would likely make the banking industry more stodgy and less profitable. Banks have already warned that if the government raises the requirement of equity, the results would be higher interest rates, less lending, and slower economic growth. While Stanley Fischer, vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, is praising Admati, members of the banking industry and public officials are pushing back against her work. Even Fisher said that although her arguments made sense in principle, the U.S. was constrained by practicality. Well, the government has already required banks to reduce their reliance on borrowed money by increasing capital standards, which dictate the share of funding that must come from equity. And officials worry that larger changes would hamstring American banks, driving businesses both to other kinds of domestic financial firms and to foreign rivals, according to the Times article.
Well, I have an article for you that just blew me away when I saw it. On Monday, the Foreign Press Association, the FPA, lodged a strong protest accusing the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas of harassment and of threatening foreign reporters working in Gaza. The Association for Journalists Working in Israel and the Palestinian territories said Hamas authorities and their representatives employed, quote, blatant, incessant, forceful, and unorthodox methods, end quote, after visiting international journalists covering the Israeli-Hamas conflict in Gaza. The FPA said in a statement, in several cases, foreign reporters working in Gaza have been harassed, threatened, or questioned over stories or information they have reported through their news media or by means of social media. The international media are not advocacy organizations and cannot be prevented from reporting by means of threats or pressure, thereby denying their readers and viewers an objective picture from the ground. Hundreds of foreign journalists traveled to Gaza during more than a month of fighting between Israel and Hamas, with perhaps 10% reporting difficulties from those authorities, FPA said. Those who experienced threats were reluctant to speak publicly for fear of repercussions. It said one photographer spoke of being beaten up and having a camera smashed. A news photographer had a camera confiscated for 3 days. And Hamas also asked people to remove tweets and YouTube videos. A European company was also threatened in the middle of the street when filming an anti-Hamas demonstration that happened in Gaza. The FPA said Hamas was also trying to put in place a vetting procedure that would, in effect, allow for the blacklisting of specific journalists. Several news organizations reported receiving a request Monday from Hamas for the name of journalist, their company, where they're based, their contact details, and the name of their translator to facilitate and organize their work. More and more reports emerging from Gaza in recent days back the Israeli government's claims that Hamas is deliberately carrying out attacks from within densely populated civilian areas. An Indian TV report exposed terrorists setting up and launching a rocket just meters away from a hotel where members of the international media were staying, in the middle of a crowded residential area. Like the tiny handful of other journalists who have defied Hamas orders not to report anything negative about them, the NDTV report was aired only after the news team had left the Gaza Strip and was free from any risk of intimidation, or worse, at the hands of Hamas's security forces. A France 24 TV journalist who famously ducked for cover during a live interview when a Hamas rocket was fired right next to him has also gone on the record to report how the rocket, which caught him off guard, was launched in a crowded civilian area right in front of a UN building.
Okay, well, this comes to us from an Italian journalist who was actually embedded in Gaza and backed the IDF's account of a rocket strike on a school playground in central Gaza's Shadi refugee camp. Well, the journalist reported on the incident as soon as he was safely out of Gaza. At least 10 people were killed in the attack, most of them children. Some sources claim the death toll was as high as 30. Palestinian sources were quick to blame Israel, claiming that an Israeli fighter jet fired missiles directly at the playground and nearby hospital. Israel denied the accusations, saying that Hamas rockets aimed at Israel from the area misfired and struck both the school and the hospital.
Israel National News reported in July that verifying facts on the ground in Gaza is notoriously difficult for foreign reporters and even for Palestinian journalists who are seen as aligned with the Fatah-led Palestinian Authority. Journalists are closely watched by Hamas security forces and can face interrogation and a permanent ban from Gaza for publishing material deemed unfavorable to the territory's Islamist rulers. As such, little information has emerged on what exactly happened that day in Shati. But returning from a stint in Gaza and safe from what he ominously referred to as potential Hamas retaliation, Italian journalist Gabriele Barbati broke the media silence by tweeting messages which confirmed that Hamas terrorists rushed to cover up evidence of what was indeed errant Hamas rocket fire aimed at Israel. During Operation Protective Edge, a handful of journalists have defied, purposely or inadvertently, Hamas's restrictions on reporting negative information from Gaza, only to backtrack soon after. 2 cases in particular were highlighted in July. In one, Wall Street Journal reporter Nick Casey tweeted evidence and veiled criticism over Hamas's leadership's use of Shifa Hospital in Gaza as a command center, shedding more light on the group's use of human shields. Hamas reacted furiously, and a Hamas-affiliated Twitter account blacklisted Casey as a journalist who lies for Israel, a potentially deadly accusation for anyone in Gaza, let alone a foreigner. Shortly afterwards, the tweet was promptly removed by Casey. Numerous foreign journalists have admitted to interviewing Hamas leaders inside the hospital, but their reports are notable for the lack of emphasis placed on such a flagrant violation of international law. In the second case, another WSJ journalist tweeted evidence of a Hamas rocket misfire which damaged Gaza's main hospital. Again, shortly after tweeting it, Tamar El-Goshabi removed the evidence. The use of human shields by Gazan terrorist groups during the current conflict has been repeatedly documented. Both Hamas and Islamic Jihad have stored and fired rockets from within densely populated civilian areas, making Israeli attempts to stop them without causing collateral damage nearly impossible. To compound the problem, Hamas has openly encouraged civilians to act as human shields, glorifying their actions as heroism. Great! Well, you know what? I thought that was just amazing. That story actually released today, and I found it on Israel National News website. But it's the foreign press that is coming together and telling the truth about what is actually happening to those journalists.
Good for them.
If you want to be in Gaza, you're not going to report the truth until you're out of Gaza.
And safe.
Because, you know what, your little life is on the line. Hey, we really appreciate you joining us today. We'll be back again with you Wednesday. In the meantime, continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Continue to pray for GLC. And, of course, my little mom. Love you a lot. We'll see you later.